Everyone in Atlanta. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone in Atlanta and around the country, around the world. And thanks to the conference organizers for inviting us. If we could ask everyone to mute yourself if you're not presenting, just so it's quieter online. Thank you. And I know others will be filtering in as we go. Today's panel is Amazon's high-tech sweatshops and racialized surveillance, a conversation with Amazon workers. We're going to spend the next hour talking about Amazon's system of policing, surveillance, and control in warehousing and in logistics. As many of you know, Amazon dictates and watches workers at every moment and uses it to speed up work, to punish workers, to fire them, and to union bust. It's a system that's led to injuries, to high turnover. Amazon has double the industry standard in both of those. And it's led to terrible and unlawful union busting and silencing of workers who are organizing. We have a great panel of experts on Amazon's policing and surveillance of workers here today. That includes two women, Monica Moody and Jennifer Bates, who currently work at Amazon facilities and who have experienced this firsthand. They've really investigated these systems from the inside and have been leading the fight to end this terrible system of control in the warehouses. We are also joined by Gabrielle Redjui from Color of Change. When Gabrielle was at the Georgetown Center on Privacy and Technology, she organized the first conference on the history and future of surveillance used against working people and drafted the first model legislation on worker surveillance. We are also joined by Tammy Lee, who is a professor at Rutgers University, who works at the intersection of race and labor, and with an incredible team of researchers that she's pulled together. They are looking at Amazon's use of police, both in warehouses in Alabama, across the South, and across the country. And I'm Ryan Garrity. I'm currently the acting director of the Athena Coalition, which is a coalition dedicated to building people power over Amazon to confront Amazon's harms to workers and to communities. And over the last 2 years, we've brought together workers who are organizing, and also abolitionist organizers and activists who are confronting Amazon's use of surveillance and partnerships with police and ICE. So with,
But you were one of the people in leadership.
Can I ask everyone to mute their, thank you. Thank you. So in having conversations between abolitionist organizers and worker organizers, we've been organizing to confront the way that Amazon uses surveillance to push workers. And with this panel, we're really inviting you all inside of that conversation, and most importantly, to hear from the workers who are leading this fight. So where we wanted to start is looking at how we got here, and the history of this kind of worker control and its link to predatory state surveillance and policing. So I'm going to turn it over to Gabrielle. Gabrielle, I'll hand it over to you.
And thanks for having me, Ryan. As Ryan mentioned, my name is Gabrielle Redjui. I'm a senior policy manager at Color of Change, which is the nation's largest online racial justice organization. I advocate for racial equity frameworks in tech and antitrust policy and for protections against worker surveillance. I'll be giving a historical survey of the surveillance of workers in America. I'll cover 3 accounts: enslaved Africans, American factories, and the United Farm Workers. I'll wrap up with a discussion of why cross-movement collaboration is needed. Surveillance and privacy discourse rarely roots our current debates in history. But it's very important to know that these are neither new struggles nor new techniques. While the tools have evolved, the spirit behind the surveillance has not. We can trace the surveillance of workers to American plantations. Simone Brown's book, Dark Matters, makes the argument that the surveillance of enslaved Africans provided the blueprint for surveillance today. Matthew Desmond's essay for the New York Times Magazine 1619 Project digs into the system developed to ensure slavery was profitable. Slave owners sought to optimize the productivity of the enslaved population and created systems to scrutinize their work. This surveillance evolved with sharecropping, with Jim Crow, and the prison industrial complex. In the late 19th century, Frederick Taylor developed a system of industrial management to ensure factory workers were as productive as possible. Tasks were simplified. Foremen would use stopwatches to ensure that workers on the line completed tasks to meet daily goals. In practice, Taylorism sought to make workers so efficient they would not be allowed to make mistakes. Managers use surveillance as a primary tool to disrupt worker organizing, but the government also has a history of surveilling labor activists for communist ties. J. Edgar Hoover ordered a decades-long investigation of Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and the United Farm Workers during the 60s and 70s. The United Farm Workers sought to unionize Mexican and Chicano-American farm workers harvesting agriculture in the American Southwest. Despite the extensive FBI surveillance and infiltration, where agents, for instance, knew what Chavez ate for breakfast and were often arrested at worker demonstrations, no subversive ties were found. Anti-surveillance work shouldn't look at law enforcement or corporations as isolated forces. Surveillance is a means to control populations. It reinforces carceral systems. We're watching public-private or corporate government distinctions erode. Big tech continues to build the technology and systems for government actors to conduct surveillance. And we're also seeing government actors exploit loopholes to access information. For example, Amazon pitched its facial recognition technology to ICE for immigration surveillance. Local law enforcement used Clearview AI facial recognition software without proper authorization. And US intelligence agencies were collecting data from Muslim prayer apps. There are communities that are already fighting against this type of surveillance. They have experience and skills that they can teach others who are new to this work. Collaboration is needed to ensure that the solutions that are built, like regulation and laws, have all stakeholders in mind. And I'll pass it to, should I pass it to you, Ryan, or to Monica?
Yeah, I'll take it. So taking like this broad historical context of racialized surveillance and control being used against working people, I want to zoom in and look at Amazon, one of the world's most powerful corporations to ever exist, the second largest employer in the United States. And we're going to hear from Monica Moody about her experience and insights into the ways that Amazon operates. Monica, I'll hand it over to you. Monica, you're muted. Okay, while we work on Monica's sound, Jennifer, it's okay if it's okay, I'll hand it to you. Oh, there we are.
Can you hear me now?
Great. Yes, Monica, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, hello. How is everybody? My name is Monica Moody, and I've been driving for Amazon for 2 years. I started off at a station called DOT1, which is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. At that time, we didn't have cameras when we first started out. Talk was coming in about them, but I really didn't first experience them until I switched over to the new station in Concord, North Carolina, DOT3. And when I first got in the van, I didn't pay it any attention, but then you realize, like, something that you can feel something watching you. So now you're looking back at it, and it's an invasion of privacy. It's weird to me because when you're on the road, you chose this job to be alone. You didn't choose this job to be micromanaged without even having a person in the vehicle. Like, it's weird. So the cameras, they work based upon, they get triggered, and according to Amazon, they say that nobody is looking at the camera footage, which I don't believe. And according to my managers, they tell me that the only way they get camera footage is if we trigger the camera and make it come on by doing something that apparently we're not supposed to be doing, such as speeding. Um, Apparently, weaving in and out of traffic is one that nobody knew about. Hard braking. We have to have a safe following distance. So even if we get cut off, like if a car cuts us off, we are supposed to brake within traffic and give them fall back and give them enough time to go in front of us, which I don't see how that's possible sometimes, considering how people really drive and that people don't really care. So I just feel like it's just a dangerous game when it comes down to that, as well as distracted driving. So, and the things with the cameras that make me feel like they're just here to get rid of us at some point is the sun had hit my eyes, and mind you, I'm only 5'5", and Amazon vans are pretty big compared to me and my height. So the sun visor does me no justice. So as I'm driving, the sun hits my eyes, and I squint my eyes, and I hear the camera go off and say distracted driving. Mind you, my eyes are on the road. I just can't see because the sun is blinding me, and I'm too short to sit up and be behind the sun visor. So I got a infraction of distracted driving just based upon me being short, basically. So, and once you get too many infractions, you're going to start getting write-ups. And once you get too many write-ups, you're going to get fired. So that's why I feel like the end goal is to get rid of, I'm not going to say bad drivers because people get infractions all the time for the simplest things. I had an infraction, and we hadn't even gotten onto the launch pad to even load our vans, and I had a seatbelt compliance infraction, but my seatbelt was on, which was weird. That's why I don't like these cameras, because they can tell when we click our seatbelts on and off. That's enough as is. We already have an app called Mentor watching us. It doesn't watch us, but it feels how we drive through our phones. I just feel like the cameras are unnecessary, and I don't know how they're personally using the footage. Once I heard Gabrielle say that they signed up with ICE, that it kind of clicked a little bit, and it made a little bit more sense on why they had cameras in the vans too, as well, for the facial recognition. So, but it's a lot. It's very disturbing to know that the slightest thing can get you an infraction, that you can get written up and be out of a job just that fast, just off of whatever the camera says. Unless they run it, unless your managers really know that you're not like a horrible driver, they look at it and they see what's going on, like, and they understand that the camera may have just triggered just because you might be okay. But if you have those managers that have the management title and they let it go to their heads, then you're pretty much screwed when it comes to Amazon, especially considering the fact that you got to think about the fact that this camera has watching you from the time you crank this van up to the time you cut it off when you get back. And the only way it goes off is if you cut it off while you're on break. And it's too hot to say that anybody's van with no air on just to cut a camera off so I can finally have a break and nobody looking at me. That's just being realistic. Like, it's 100 degrees outside. Who wants to take a break and cut their van off just to have nobody look at them while they eat? I might as well keep it on that point. You don't watch me do everything else for the day. You're going to watch me eat and take a nap too at this point. Might as well just call me on the phone and we can talk about it, because that's the next step. We're gonna be on the phone with somebody through our whole route. Like, it's crazy to me. A lot of people that I've talked to don't like the cameras as well, coworkers and people from other companies that I might just run by. But I definitely feel like I said, the end goal is to end up getting rid of, I guess you could say, horrible drivers, or shutting companies down. That way they can figure out another way to deliver the packages without having to pay the human element, to get rid of the human element and just keep paying robots or do whatever they do in their free time. So, who should I pass it to? Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Monica.
No problem.
So we're going to move from looking at the driver side of things to the warehouse side of things. And we have Jennifer Bates with us, who's one of been leading organizing in Bessemer, Alabama, which is like a really historical fight with brilliant organizers. So very grateful to have you here. Workers have been organizing there and have faced incredible, insane, illegal union busting tactics. So we want to hear, Jennifer, from you about why you started organizing in the facility, what you were seeing, and then the pushback you faced at Amazon, and a little bit what's next.
Okay, hi everybody. As Ryan said, that I'm Jennifer Bates, and I've actually worked at Amazon Fulfillment Center in Bessemer, Alabama for a little over 2 years. And my heart goes out to Monica, because I can imagine working on the van as hot as it is. But one of the things that she talked about as far as the camera is concerned is how that we've experienced is how Amazon use it against us, but for them. If the camera, if I'm scanning in, you see me coming through the gate. When I'm scanning on my computer, so you know I'm in there, you know I'm there. And one of the things I want to point out is when I first, early on when I first started, one of the guys that I worked with was pulled off of one of his stations to go do spider work. Spider work is moving and taking product to different sales for other employees. But he was fired the next day because they told him, you know, where were you for 2 hours, 3 hours? And he said, remember, you pulled me, you know, the manager pulled me off. She said, no, I didn't, I don't remember. So this time he said, please pull the cameras. He kept telling them to pull the cameras. No one pulled the cameras and he got fired. The following day, manager tells one of the guys that was working, oh yeah, you know what? I do remember pulling him off, but no one worked to get his position back. So that was one of the things that had me, when I went there, you know, I was excited. Amazon, I'm used to getting packages, but I'm excited because they're there, you know, and I get an opportunity to work there. But I looked around, I saw so many things, TOT. We didn't find out about time off task until people started getting written up and saying, they're asking, what is time off task? So what a way to introduce time off task, but with a write-up. And if you get 3 of them, you can be terminated. I've seen people getting pulled off of the line and walked out, telling them to sign off, going to HR. So trying to find a position to work. You get in there in the facility, and then so when you get in, wherever floor that your manager's on, that's the floor you're supposed to go on. You have to go on that floor and walk around until you find a place to work. If there is no position, no sales open on that floor, you have to go upstairs to 2nd, 3rd, or 4th floor, walk back down until you find one. So at that point, you're racking up TOT, time off task, and they're not going to forgive you for that. It's on you until finally, I think lately they've started assigning stations for associates, because that's one of the things that we brought forth during the election, the first one and the second one. Same thing with restroom. If there's not one available in your area, you have to walk around the facility or you have to walk upstairs just to find one. But in the meantime, you're collecting time off task and can get written up unless the PA is scrubbing your time, saying, you know, and God forbid if the PA doesn't like it. So you've racked up on time off task and you're fired. And one of the things, there's no resolution. I've seen people get fired, not bringing them in to try to teach them or train them, or we understand what's going on, or even when the line is down. You have the cameras and you're able to see what's going on. We don't have work, so why are you writing people up for not getting their packages? We have security in the front. I will stop going through security on my break. told to scan my badge on the side of the wall, and then walk into a locker room to take off my shoes, empty my pockets, take off my vest. I asked for that time back. They told me that I don't get the time back. I just have to take the remainder of my break. And also we have police in the parking lot. This is the first place I've ever worked at where you have security on the inside and you have policemen on the outside. And I think that's racially profiled. You have periodically where the security lights go off. So people are coming out. So randomly you get stopped. So for me, it was more so of power control. It's just like a giant over an elephant over an ant, because I don't have no choice but to do what you say or you can get fired. And that was when other people in other departments started talking and discussing the things that were going on in their department and along with other employees that they work with, people that I work with, facilities, and some of the friends that I had outside. People will get together and talk. Even sitting at the lunch table, you look up, there's a camera right on you. If you're in your workstation, you can look up, left or right, you have cameras directly on you. So it's almost like I can't adjust myself without being afraid that, you know, you're watching me, or maybe in the restroom. So that's when we really decided that we needed a union in order to pull back some of the power back to the employees, making decisions, fighting for our jobs, for job security. If there's an issue, then let's come up with a resolution. Then just firing people instead of just saying, and like Monica was saying, I think it's designed to let go of employees during a certain season. I spoke with a young lady inside the cafe in the break room one day. She had been to jail before. She's been to prison before. And she was saying that the facility is designed just like it. Each person in the store department, they're in their own personal cells. We have the high stairs, 4 flights high. And they're not the little small stairs either. They're long stairs outside. You have the small stairs in the back door, and you have the long stairs. You have a 4-flight facility, and you only have this small elevator, and then you say that people can't take it only unless you can't take another route, which is somebody who probably in a wheelchair, you know.
Jennifer, do you want to talk a little bit about the pushback you faced when you started your unionization effort and the tactics Amazon used?
Yes, once we began with the start, at first we were we was discreet on who we spoke with, and basically it was a small group of us, and we began to talk to other people. So eventually, Amazon, we use some of the PAs, work with them, and talking with employees. Like this second term with trying to unionize, one of the things that we did, we collaborated with wearing our shirts to show solidarity inside the facility, where the PAs will go around and they will tell certain employees, get away from me, you know, with their negativity, or that's the reason why you didn't get your position, because you're walking around with that shirt on. So they was pushing fear. They will put me in less in the back of the line to keep me from getting my numbers. Or they will put me in a position where I couldn't work with anybody. There's no one on the other side of the line or in front of me. So I had no one to talk to or discuss anything with. So therefore, if I was just always working in less probable positions, I couldn't get the numbers that I would normally get. My ambassadorship was taken. They told me it was because I didn't have enough UPT hours. I only had 3. And I needed 10. I said, well, I have the application here. They said, you passed everything. Your supervisor turned it in, and but you didn't have enough UPT. I said, well, these are the qualifications written on the application. And if I passed everything on here, so the second time around, so she said, well, we have the right to make that decision. But when I went to look for it, after it was presented to me, a letter was presented to me from an old supervisor. He came to me while I was working with the envelope. He said, I was told to give you this. And when I opened up, it was telling me that I didn't qualify. So I went to find out. Well, nobody could find my application. Learning and the ambassador shop said the HR had it. HR said we wouldn't have no reason to have it. We're two different departments and we have nothing to do with learning. The next day, I went back to learning. She said, yes, they do. HR asked for your application. And that happened the day after I testified. And I went upstairs and they said, no, HR wouldn't have anything to do with that. These are this is not the main HR, it's the HRs that be on the floor. So I went to, one of the, Abigail said, that's weird because HR wouldn't have it, but I'm gonna email her and find out why she told you that. But I can't find it either. Said me and such, we look for it and it's not in the drawer with all the rest of them. She said, but I'm gonna walk you to the main office. That was my first time finding out that we had a main office. And someone came out, she said, well, the person you're looking for is not here, but we don't know where, but it wouldn't be back here with us. And we'll do everything we can to make sure we find out where it's at. So the next day, she said, oh, here it is. It was in the drawer, but then we can only give you the front part, the part that you filled out. And I couldn't get it. They put flyers up in the bathroom stalls. We tried to do actions outside the door. We had loss prevention came and told us to leave the property, that we couldn't be there. We had to let them know that this protective action and that we were allowed to be out front campaigning for our union. So there were several things that they did to kind of attack, and they scared a lot of employees as well.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. And we should have time in the Q&A to talk about what's next in your facility. But we're gonna turn to Tammy Lee, who went down to Bessemer and spent a bunch of time with workers, and we're gonna hear about early findings from her work and her observations.
Yeah, hi everyone. I first want to just say to Monica and Jennifer, thank you so much for your bravery and your organizing campaigns, but also coming in these public forums and repeating over and over what I consider to be trauma that's happening to you in the workplace every day. And so I just really want to center you and appreciate you for what you're doing. I'm going to try to make sure that you all have more time than I take on this. I guess I also want to thank LRAN, because the only reason I'm in this conversation right now is that LRAN is a network in which RWDSU reached out to the Labor Research Action Network looking for a scholar who could center race in our sort of investigation of the practices that Amazon was using and whether or not that had disproportionate impact on workers of color, but particularly Black workers, as Bessemer is 80% Black workforce. I'm going to sort of talk in combination or collaboration with Jennifer, but also I have one of the other authors on the study, Maite Tapia, who's at Michigan State. She's in the audience, and I would invite her to also add to this. But just to tell you how this all got started. So first of all, what is it? RWDSU was very concerned about a couple of things that happened over the course of these or yes, maybe even 3 elections that have been going on in Bessemer over the last couple of years. And as you know, we've been fighting a racial justice fight, a new one that's very significant in this country, that really changed the conversation, broadened the participants in the conversation about what racial justice is, and centering Black workers, Black people, right? And so what was happening is, there was a constant police presence in Bessemer during the campaign. There were workers who were arrested at the facility for quote unquote trespassing. And so, RWDSU on their own began a sort of a FOIA or public records request for records about formal relationships with police departments in those jurisdictions where Amazon had fulfillment centers nationwide. So, we're looking at a couple hundred facilities. And we took up that work from RWDSU. I have a quantitative team and a qualitative team. And on the quantitative side, we saw some interesting things in the preliminary sort of returns from those public record documents, right? What we found is that Amazon is much more likely to have formal police relationships, meaning the formal, hiring of off-duty police officers or some other kind of arrangement. And mind you, it's probably much bigger than this because this only looks at direct formal relationships between police departments and Amazon. There's a lot of third-party contractors involved, right? And so that they were more likely to have those formal relationships with police departments in the South, right? What we would call the Black Belt. And so, we're like, yeah, let's go down and talk to workers and make sure we understand what this actually means for Black workers organizing in the South. The study is not just situated there. Our preliminary report came out in Bessemer because we were able to get down on the ground and had folks like Jennifer, Big Mike, and a bunch of folks who were organizing willing to talk to us while they were organizing, right? Which, thank you for inviting us into that space. But we're currently also now we're soon to be on the ground, but we're definitely talking to workers in Garner, North Carolina, who are also, reporting out similar things that we found in Bessemer. And so when our qualitative team went down to talk to Jennifer and everybody who was organizing, there were a couple of things that really struck us from, a theoretical lens. First of all, the definition of policing has to be expanded. And I've talked to Ryan about this and other folks who are working with Amazon, either through unions or coalitions or whatever, that Amazon is unique in the sense of its ownership of surveillance equipment, its willingness to use that on workers in-house, but also as a provider of surveillance technology to law enforcement, right? It also was using this technology that it has with human resources, where it was creating situations in which the police or the threat of police would be a response to a routine HR matter. Right. So Jennifer described if your card doesn't work or your A to Z app suddenly tells you that you can't go to work, you're trying to talk to human resources, triggers a threat of private security and also possibly police, right, being called in order to escort you off the facility with, threat of trespassing. And so we're thinking like, we need to broaden out what we're actually talking about when we talk about Amazon's policing of its workers. It's not just the use of these formal police contracts where it's using off-duty police, right? It's also the technology that it's using. It's also and Monica was describing the constant surveillance through that technology of their everyday work. Gabrielle talks about scientific management and this constant, monitoring of worker motion, time studies, time and motion studies, which is a sort of a real fundamental part of Taylorism and scientific management. Amazon is using all of those things together to create a situation which the workers themselves described as a near carceral experience. People who were formerly incarcerated, who were once sold this idea that, oh, I'm so thankful for Amazon giving me a chance to work when I can't work anywhere else. And as soon as they started working there, they feel exactly like they felt when they were incarcerated by the state. I don't know that one of the important things about studying Amazon and its surveillance is that if it becomes a model for how human resources is going to work outside of Amazon and other, competitors and other people in the industry, I don't know that we need to let them get off the hook with the kind of things that they're trying to do to justify this sort of environment that they're creating. Related to this idea of policing and surveillance, and I'll kind of maybe leave to question and answer the specifics about what we found there, but related was this idea that they're using policing and they're combining it with what we're calling a corporate police state, right? Meaning workers are aware, and in Bessemer, this was very, very stark, where there was a situation where Amazon was able to get Bessemer, the city, to change the speed of the traffic light outside of the facility so that when workers were handing out leaflets, right? And there was a cop, there was a police officer stationed right there at that traffic light. So when workers are constantly being surveilled, there's constant police presence, and you know that Amazon your employer has the power to call the city and have the traffic lights sped up, it starts to become a modern company town. How much power, there's a blurring of the line of how much power Amazon has over the city, right? Over the police department, right? And that has the obvious impact, right? Potential impact of causing workers to think that it's futile to resist, right? And that it's inevitable that Amazon has all of this power to police them at work, right? And on their way in and out of work. So company towns are not great for workers, as we know, right? And so we're worried about how that blurring of the lines and Amazon's actual power over jurisdictions and state actors might cause a problem. And that would be exaggerated, of course, for Black workers, given, especially if we look at the Southern Black Belt, given the history of policing and race, right, in the country as a whole, but Birmingham's civil rights history, the way the police were used to break up those sorts of labor protest and rallies. And so that's in the collective memories of 80% of the workforce who's Black. And so when Amazon is using these types of tactics, then I think we need to really be focused there as a public. I'm speaking as giving public information in a report saying, this is what Amazon is doing. Are you all okay with the fact that that's how workers are being treated, right? And so the other thing I want to talk about is the sort of the racialization of employment relations at Amazon. And this one I think has implications for all types of employers, right? In fact, all of us are employers who may be prone to do this, but Amazon is engaging in certain practices like, building employee networks that are racialized or gendered or by some other social identity group. So Jennifer certainly talk about BEN, the Black Employees Network, right? Which is supposed to be a group for Black workers to, solve Black worker issues. It has a high level of management participation and control. Right. So some might argue in some cases, these might be 8A2 unions, right? They're like company unions really, but these employee networks, there's a one for gay folks and one for Latinos and right. And so using the facade of diversity and inclusion to racialize and fragment a workplace is certainly nothing new that employers do. But the way in which Amazon is also donating to community groups and targeting the communities that workers are a part of and setting up a situation where those groups really need funds. And now if you take money from Amazon, are you going to stand with workers when they have a protest? It's muddling the coalitional space by the fact that it's there and racializing that. And I would argue with intention, right? Although intent is not necessary, when you're doing this type of behavior as an employer, it's having an impact on the workers. And so there's a lot that we can talk about there. I won't over talk it because I think I would love for this to be collaborative and for people to ask workers directly, since we brought some for the panel about what kind of things that they're going through there. But that's pretty much, a summary of the snapshot. And so like we said, this case study is going to be nationwide. We are moving into Minnesota, and I mentioned Garner, North Carolina. In Garner, we have the same issues about, a Black and Latino workforce, more Latino representation there than in Bessemer. But also what's really coming to light from worker interviews is the ways in which Amazon is preying on disabled workers and setting them up in situations in which they fail, right? And so disability becomes a lens through which we have to look at. In Minnesota, we're looking at religion and the way in which Amazon is controlling workers with that, religion, gender, and immigration status, right? Or being an immigrant, right? And so we really think that Amazon is absolutely aware of the identity politics that it is using in combination with surveillance, in combination with, right, with policing to create, you know, this amplified worker control, right, from an intersectional lens of workers who are in fact intersectional. So I don't know, Maite, if you have anything to add about the research, and then I think we can, you know, have a conversation amongst all of us.
I think this was great, Tammy. Thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge also our PhD student, Carla Lima, who's on this panel. And she's been actually spending a couple of months down in Bessemer, Alabama, and is a critical part also of our kind of large team. So thanks for laying that all out, and I would open it up.
Great. So let's open it up to questions, both from the audience in the room and also between participants, if any of you have questions for each other. Who has a question? We'll let people think for a minute. While people are thinking about questions, because I know it takes folks to get a little bit of courage up to ask a question, I just want to be like specific, actually, since this is a labor conference, people know the worker issues well. So I'll just spell out Amazon's surveillance partnerships with law enforcement. Amazon has over 2,000 contracts with police departments across the country, with some of the most violent police departments there are. And they actively encourage these partnerships by saying that there's high crime, that packages will get stolen, that you can identify unknown people in your neighborhood, and we all know what that means, and encourage really like neighbors to police their own neighborhoods in racist ways. And then also they're the technological infrastructure for the Department of Homeland Security in their war against Muslims, and also for immigration, which polices and tracks immigrants relentlessly, and it leads to detention and deportation. And right now, as we speak, ICE is building a new immigrant tracking system called HEART, and Amazon is the backbone of that collects all the information you could possibly have about a human, and allows you to identify where they are and what they're doing at any given time. So this is like the system outside of the warehouses. And I think, as we all heard Monica and Jennifer describe, like in many ways, this is the same kind of system that's being deployed against really hardworking people who are delivering our packages. So just wanted to flesh that out, and I hope some people have some courage to ask some questions now.
Ryan, just like just going more into detail about something that you said, you know, in Bessemer in particular, but it's becoming clear to us in the case of Garner as well. One of the things that Amazon is doing is that the private in-house security they use is often Black people. And so then you're using Black people to police Black people in the South, right? And there's something about the way in which that's being controlled, which is also, I think, super problematic about the type of worker control, the racialized worker control that we're seeing. Of course, you know, the combination of private policing with public police and this technology is bad for all workers. That is particularly troublesome when we're thinking about how Black workers feel in a workplace environment, right? And where the allegiances are, right? And if you're trying to organize in that space and you've got Black people being used by Amazon to police Black folks who are engaged in union activity, this has, you know, a really strong community sentiment. So I just wanted to bring that in the room because it is something that we don't really talk about a lot. Like we can just talk about Amazon security, but they're using Black folks to police other Black folks. And that is something we have to give name to. There's a question, I guess, in the chat there, Ryan.
I want to also add to how we once had a white general manager. After the first union election, we had mostly all white upper management, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Most of them were coming in from the outside in. So they changed the whole dynamic of what the floor looked like. They brought us in an African as a general manager, and they brought in more Black managers. But for us, it was almost like a slap in the face because it was almost like you're just painting it and you're pitting us against each other. So now you have a lot of Black managers who's walking around telling employees, hey, you know, you don't need a union, blah, blah, blah. And we're listening because, hey, you know, it's a thing in the past, you know, and you're walking around and people are still being abused, power is being abused, but now the facility look Black-faced, you know. So they got the local school. You know, I think you were talking earlier about it being a company town. Now they're partnering with the school like this next door, and you bring in the band in, you're offering money to them. We used to host union meetings at the Milo's across the street, and at one point they locked the doors. You know, there were no problem. We had people coming in and out. So what Amazon does is, hey, they start catering from these places. So it's almost like another, that's a part of policing, you know, because now we see what the employees are doing. You know, if I can get the community to get involved and we begin to pay them for hey, you either gonna allow them in or we won't dive in and give you money to cater here. So they pour from different restaurants so that then we can no longer sit there and bring the people in.
Right. So it's like a commodification of Black bodies, right? And then the criminalization of them through this surveillance and policing. And then you're weaponizing Black bodies by making them the private security that's busting up the unions and telling Black workers they don't need unions, right? You can't tell me that that doesn't have intentionality. It certainly has consequences. And one of the great stories out of Bessemer is like, despite all of that, right, you still have Black workers fighting for not one time, a second cycle.
That's right.
And still too close to call, right? In the face of all of that. Right. And so, you know, we really need to listen to Jennifer and those folks about what are the strategies to resist Amazon's doing this, which seems to me as part of their new employment relations that I think is racialized. But it is very intense and very severe. And it was very hard to not only to listen to what's happening to Black folks in that facility, but to create a safe space where they could actually say that, right? Even though there's Black managers telling them not to organize, even though there's Black security that's patting them down, right? If a metal detector goes off, right? So it's a lot. And it's gendered, it's racialized, and it seems like it's also directed at folks with disability who are of color. So we really, really want to put a public spotlight and, you know, through this coalition work, through this report we're doing, and just keeping in contact with the folks at Bessemer, because whether or not they win this election or not, I don't think that those workers are going to stop fighting. And we could ask Jennifer directly, and let's ask Monica directly, like winning the union election would be great, but this is a fight for just their humanity in a system that is, you know, trying to reduce them to being, you know, widgets. Throwback to Gabrielle's pointing of Taylorism, right?
So let's, I see this question in the chat, and I think we can actually sort of wrap it into closing statements from the panelists, because I think what's important to consider, and sort of the question asked, like, how are you organizing and resisting these systems? It's really important that we don't think about this as like individually we should, because these practices, all of the ones described, should or are illegal. And workers are building power over them. So I want to really focus on that as like our future vision, that we abolish this kind of low road, highly racialized system of control that we're seeing at Amazon. So what I want to do is go around, give each panelist, just a minute or so to reflect on collectively what we talked about, and any sort of calls to action or next steps that you have, and then we'll wrap up. So Jennifer, if I can actually just start with you, any like closing thoughts, and then we'll go to Monica, and then Tammy, and then Gabrielle.
Yes, one of the things that we'll continue to do right now is to act as a union. We're continuing to talk to employees. And one of the things I think right now in this part of the unionization, while we're waiting on a decision from the labor board, is to continue to keep the employees encouraged. Though we're losing a lot, some of them are moving and moving to other facilities to work, even the no voters. So it's basically trying to keep others encouraged while we're waiting. And I think one of the things that we need to do is change labor laws, have more stern pushback or punishment for things that are obviously illegal. And one of the things that Amazon uses is money. Okay, if I get in trouble for doing this, all I have to do is pay a fine, because the labor laws are not strong enough. So therefore, they continue to do it. They continue with the same playbook, not just in Bessemer, but at any facility. And I think basically they'll pass it along to other companies, and they'll begin to do the same thing if we don't stop it. And
Thanks, Jennifer. Monica, handing it over to you. Closing thoughts. Just give you a second to unmute since it's a pain on the phone. Tammy, let me go to you and then we'll come back to Monica.
Okay, so obviously for us, the researchers who are working in collaboration with the workers, our next steps are to make sure that we do really good research and get it disseminated to the public. And I think those of you who are on the call who are the public or who are organizers, we have to keep the worker struggle in the news, in the media. We can't forget about Bessemer. We cannot forget about Bessemer. We have to keep that story and that history as we move forward in all these victories and losses. We really need to center what the workers have been doing in the South. And I think that's really important part of the conversation about wins and other places, right? We can't turn our backs on folks like Chris Smalls. We have to protect them. Once they get these union campaigns, they're still fighting against Amazon and all their lawyers. That's going to take the community to rally around whatever the workers need in a contract fight. If they're so lucky as to get this, this representation, we have to support them. Right. And that means if they call us to boycott one day, we boycott. If they tell us to keep buying at Amazon, because that's what they need, we keep buying. But we have to keep them centered in what it is that they need in order to be successful at the bargaining table. Right. So don't abandon Bessemer. Right. Don't change the narrative from this being, an uprising of folks who were worried about things above class issues. Right. And to support. If they win or lose, the community has to support.
Thanks, Tammy. Monica, you do *6, as Gabrielle reminded me, you can unmute. Okay, Gabrielle, let me push it to you, and then we'll come back to Monica.
Yeah, I want to just echo what Jennifer and Tammy both shared. Solidarity is very important in this moment. And just a lot of the things that we're seeing at Amazon, like my fellow panelists also said, like we're going to see that spread if we don't stop it at the root. And so it's super important to listen to Amazon workers and address what's happening there now, rather than wait for it to spread to everyone else. And to the question in the chat about security practices, Jennifer mentioned something that is super important. You know, you start small, you have conversations with folks that you trust, and you make sure that it's very clear that this is something that you want to, that it's something that you don't want to be stopped. We always plug Signal as a chat, don't use work place communications, because like Monica mentioned, like management is always looking, even if they say that they're not, you have to assume that they are looking. And so you want to look at encrypted, safer chats and using personal devices rather than work devices to start the organizing and to get the ball rolling.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Monica, last chance. I hope you can unmute. Okay. So I want to say, just to close us out, thanks everyone for joining. Folks can follow Bessemer Workers, Amazonians United, the ALU, Warehouse Worker Resource Center, Missouri Workers Center, AWOOD, Philly Jobs with Justice, Warehouse Workers for Justice, to get involved in the fight back. The Athena Coalition's been working to get the agencies in Congress and states to take action, and you can reach out to me to hear more about laws moving in that direction, and really want to thank Monica and Jennifer, especially. You know these systems better than anyone else in the world, better than any of us. And thanks to Gabrielle and Tammy for joining, and to the conference organizers. And everyone have a great day.
Thank you, guys.